live with Cecil Lammy and Matt
And this
Waldman.
hangout is on air live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Audible Live, Cecil Lammy, Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom, and we're here to talk with you about the National Football League as OTAs are going on. Of course, give you the fantasy twist, but Bloom, you'll be a little distracted tonight.
I am. It's Game 7, Pittsburgh Penguins. I was just for inspiration watching the Penguins come back in Game 1 of the 92 Stanley Cup Finals against the Blackhawks. It's been back and forth. It's 1-1. And if you have to ask me a question 2 or 3 times, or if I'm just emoting more than usual, folks will understand. And I would understand if you're listening to this tomorrow and watching Game 7, because Game 7 in NHL playoffs, and we're 14 minutes and 28 seconds. I bloomed the Penguins by saying this. We're of an overtime, and an overtime in a Game 7 is about as good as it gets in sports.
Yeah, and how does the NHL get it so right in the playoffs and so wrong in the regular season? That's probably for another show, another podcast there, Bloom. And
Yeah.
Matt Waldman is here live in Georgia. Matt, how's it going, man?
Doing pretty well. Just burning the oil, getting ready to write another article for the Football Diehards magazine. One of the magazines I first started reading many years ago when I first got into fantasy football, and it's always been a joy for several years now that I get to do a little work for Emil Cadlick and Bob Harris. So it'll be fun to get that thing in the can and see how that magazine turns out. It's always been a good read.
Yeah, it's back in time for, of course, fantasy football drafts that are getting started and all this news going around. First off, an Odell Beckham Jr. Bloom, how big of a deal is this? Voluntary OTAs, hanging out with Johnny Manziel. The optics are bad, but what's the reality?
The reality is it's as big a deal. I forget who was it tweeted out something to this effect. It's as big a deal as all the other things about Odell Beckham that have been blown out of proportion. I think there's something about Beckham's personality, and Cecil, Matt. I mean, we could probably think of Terrell Owens comes to mind. There's certain kinds of personalities that the public or some of the folks that cover the NFL just don't like. And I think they even kind of root for their failure or are skeptical that their success can continue. And in some ways, they try to alter the course of the player's career by making these molehills into mountains. But we know that Odell Beckham, he's got it. If there's anything that's going to hold Odell Beckham back this year, it's that Eli Manning might be over the hill, but it's not going to be because he's hanging out with Johnny Manziel.
Yeah. Matt, your thoughts as everyone, the Twitter toughness out there, it's going nuts about this. Giants beat writers are acting like this is the worst thing ever. Let's weigh this thing in reality.
I'll just wait and see. I mean, that's kind of the way that I look at it, is that right now the reality is that he's one of the best wide receivers in the game. He's a little hot-headed and intense as a competitor, and he's played extremely well for the past few years. So based on that past history, I'm going to say that he's going to continue to be a little hot-headed. He's going to continue to be intense on the field. He's going to continue to play really well, and he's going to continue to be one of the best wide receivers in the league. And until he hits a tipping point that people are worried about, who are going to play, father to the 16-year-old boy that they're worried about, going out with their friends at night, and they're going to project that onto Odell Beckham, the adult, then, they can go ahead and do that all they want. Maybe they could find better things to do, like do that with their actual kid. I don't know.
Pay attention to reality. Nobody wants to do that, Matt.
No. We need to make things up.
Let's do this. By the way, speaking of doing that, what's up with your boy Richard Sherman, Matt? Like, it won't let go. Like, I know y'all Seahawks defenders don't like Russell Wilson. Does anybody really on that team? I mean, honestly. But come on, Sherman, you gotta let it go. Y'all lost the Super Bowl.
Well, I mean, I think that, I hadn't read the article, but I did talk with someone who was kind of, from their football experience and talking about locker room culture. They talked a lot about the idea that it's hard to really put in print what a locker room culture is really like without it getting into a situation where people can misconstrue some of that. And, generally he talked about, for instance, that he had a quarterback that he used to bait all the time who made this same mistake of a read where he looked like a bang 8 route and pretended to looked it off, but never really did. And he always threw the interception on that route. And everyone called him rerun because he made the same mistake over and over again. And it was a teammate, Yeah, exactly. And so, those types of things happen in locker rooms and on a regular basis. And so they're trying to make it seem like Seattle's different, Sherman's different, but I don't know if it's so different as it is. I have to read the article, but from the impression that I heard from the person who asked me about it today, and was commenting on it just because they thought it was interesting how it was, it got a lot of play. Then he thought, locker room culture is locker room culture, and some people just don't understand that this is a part of it. People getting in fights, people having to be separated, people yelling at each other after somebody makes a big mistake. These things happen. I mean, Frank, the fact that a rookie, we didn't have a big deal about Frank Gore, tearing, basically going after rookie, veterans when he was a rookie because they lost a game and they seemed to be just joking around, but maybe in some, if we were looking at other work cultures, even if Frank Gore was right, the fact that he was the new guy, like tearing it into somebody, even if he was right about it, would have been kind of controversial in other cultures. So I look at this, and this is just part of football culture, especially if a rookie's going to do that and everyone's okay with it.
Cecil, really quick.
There's fighting in families, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I ask you. In the Broncos team that most recently won the Super Bowl, how big was the defense versus offense rivalry within the team? As much as you can comment on that, how much of a motivating factor for that defense was almost like the offense as their enemy or adversary?
I'll take you a little bit behind the scenes as much as I can. TJ Ward was the only guy to ever really dance around that with Peyton Manning there. Because with 18 there, everyone knew, like, okay, the offense kind of stinks, and, it's not really very versatile. It's very predictable. There's problems with the offense, but 18's over there. So we're going to do our job. We know that 18's going to get us in the right spot. So it was Peyton Manning being there that kind of prevented that. Without Peyton Manning last year, you saw that split. You saw Russell Okung get shouted down by Aqib Talib. You saw Aqib Talib shove Jordan Norwood after another gaffe. So, that is real, and it's part of the family that you get when you're on a football team. So for me, I read the story, and again, it's kind of like the Odell Beckham Jr. thing, Bloom. That's not really a big deal to me.
No.
All right, we'll move on. How about Colin Kaepernick in Seattle, Bloom? How would you like that?
It's perfect. And I guess maybe the I don't want to say downer here is that we know that Russell Wilson is very durable. I mean, I think that Russell Wilson played through an injury last year that most quarterbacks would not have played through. And I think that, by the way, as an aside, that's why Russell Wilson will be a good value if you don't want to wait. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in the 10th to 18th ranked quarterbacks. You could just take 2 of them and probably going to get 1 hit out of them. But if you want to take a quarterback in the top 6 or 8, Russell Wilson's a great pick because everyone's forgetting that he wasn't right for half of the year. And then once he was right, he picked up where he left off, even with offensive line issues. And he's going to get a healthier Tyler Lockett, healthier. And we saw Paul Richardson do some things, a healthier Jimmy Graham. But so we probably aren't going to get to see Kaepernick play if he ends up with the Seahawks. But he's a perfect backup. And I like that he took to social media to say, I never had any problem with being a backup. And he's the perfect backup because he's competent. That I think some of the stuff about him not being able to run the offense has been overblown or changing the offense for him. But he's going to give the defense a changeup. You're not going to be prepared for him. You're probably not going to be prepared for him if he has to start the next 2 or 3 games. And what he has to offer is something that any offense can hinge off of, especially an offense that has a good defense like Seattle's defense. So I think it's a perfect fit, and they have the right locker room culture. They have the right coaching culture. Everybody knows that when players go to Seattle, whatever your reputation was, whatever happened at your last stop or last 2 or 3 stops goes out the window. So I think it's a wonderful fit if they make it happen.
Matt, what about Cap with your Seahawks?
I mean, it's fine. I mean, I think that he's a quality quarterback in the NFL in terms of someone that should be on the depth chart who can give you some starter opportunities. He's not a great player in the middle of the field in terms of throwing in the middle of the field, in my opinion. But I do think that he's a guy that can deliver, set plays that can give you some work on the outside, on the perimeter. He can throw the ball up to people who win the ball in the air, and Seattle certainly has that. And I think that you'll see a stark difference between the two players if they have to start because, again, Russell Wilson has been a fantasy quarterback one for pretty much every year of his career. Even last year, he finished that way and supported two fantasy starters as pass catchers, which is, again, not usually 8 to 10 teams a year do that. And he did that with basically crap for an offensive line and the two injuries that he had. And so that should tell you right then and there that you're looking at a player who has the three components that I look for in a quarterback is that he can play from the pocket, he's mobile, and he's a creator. And he can do all three of those things. Whereas I look at Colin Kaepernick, and I would say that he can play from the pocket in terms of when you give him space, and he's mobile, but he's not a creator. And I know people may say, well, wait a minute, he creates a lot with his legs. But to me, a creator is a guy who uses his legs to create with his arm and his mind. And I don't think that Kaepernick has quite proven that on a consistent basis. And that's okay. Marcus Mariota is a terrific quarterback, but he's not that way either. He's not a creator in that regard. He's more of a mobile pocket guy at this stage. And those types of labels change as those guys evolve or regress. And, for me, Kaepernick is starting probably a little bit more from a regressed standpoint. And we'll see, hopefully, as a Seattle fan, we never see Colin Kaepernick take the field. Because even if the rest of the locker room may hate Russell Wilson, I don't care about his personality. I love his play on the field, and I love the way that he plays football.
Really quick as an aside, Cease, as we're talking about this, why didn't the Steelers look at Kaepernick? With Ben Roethlisberger's injury history?
Well, they have a fantasy that Josh Dobbs is going to be their quarterback in the future. I'm so worried about Dobbs.
Sure, he can be. Well, that's fine, yeah. But I think that, especially with Roethlisberger reiterating, well, I only gave them a 1-year commitment. Doesn't the Steelers, with their offensive line, with their running game, with the deep ball they have, I mean, like Matt was saying, Kaepernick might not be the most nuanced quarterback at making plays outside of the pocket, or there's some things he can do and there's things he can't do. But when you surround him with those kinds of players, then that magnifies the value of his running ability, because it's harder to just contain him in the pocket. And you have, one of the stories right now of training camp, of OTAs, is Martavis Bryant. So you give him Martavis Bryant, Antonio Brown, and Juju, and Eli Rogers, and so on. It seems like a perfect fit, but
I would add this: if Mara for the Giants basically said that he never got more emotional mail from fans about Colin Kaepernick and what happened, and as a reason for why they wouldn't even look at him, I would think that the Steelers and the fan base of the Steelers would be similar.
Yeah, well, and that may be one of the things that they're factoring in.
Back into why Seattle is a progressive city, a liberal city, and a fit for him on and off the field as well. Kaepernick's a pure sight thrower. He's got to see it. He doesn't anticipate it.
Yeah,
so imagine him with Antonio Brown. Look at Bloom. Bloom, give us a score update, buddy. What's going on?
Hey, shoots and scores. I'll scratch my back with a hacksaw. The Penguins just got a power play and scored right away. I think it was Jordan Schultz, the defenseman, who just came back. So they got 8 minutes and 16 seconds. But listen, the Penguins took the lead.
For the next decade, may we always be talking only about the Penguins and how Josh Dobbs is the joke that just keeps paying itself as a Browns fan.
I knew Matt as a Browns Hawks fan would be all over the Josh Dobbs pick.
Oh yeah, I love it. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
And not when Deshaun Kaiser comes around though. But the Penguins took the lead in the second period, and 20 seconds later, Ottawa tied it up. So, and as I was saying it too, I was saying to the love of my life, Kate, well, the Penguins just can't relax here because they just went ahead. So we'll see. As we know, the Pittsburgh fans are the most neurotic fans. Cecil, you're with me here. Pittsburgh fans, we're the most neurotic fans, but often like well-deserved neuroses because when we're watching the game, we know what's about to happen.
Well, when Ben gets hurt, I mean, as tough as he is, when he gets hurt and misses 2 or 3 games, the whole team falls apart.
Exactly. That's why they needed Kaepernick.
Let's kick some ice. Bloom, I should have started the show with this.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, on the 4.0 at Columbia.
Ah, yes.
And now on the spot with the New England Patriots, I was texting with our man, Andrew Hawkins, the day he was signed by New England. The dude is like the coolest guy ever. He was the first fan of Sigmund Bloom and Cecil Lammy and Draft Guys TV to Andrew Hawkins. Going to New England where his style, it's a hell of a fit. Now, it's a jam-packed receiver group, to be sure. But man alive, and he took less money so he could get that championship.
Yeah, and we'll see if he sticks with the team, like you said, because there's not a team that's even close to. I think I would, off the top of my head, I cannot think of a team even close to New England that has what they have 5 deep at wide receiver. When you have Edelman and Amendola inside, I think Mitchell can play inside and outside, and then Hogan and Cooks outside. So I don't know with this team surely keeping 4, maybe 5 running backs if they keep Brandon Bolden. I would imagine that James O'Shaughnessy will make it as the 3rd tight end, and perhaps they'll keep Hollister as the 4th tight end. So there might not be room on this roster for 6 wide receivers. If there is, though, Hawkins is a tremendous addition. But I wanted to say Cease, too. I don't know if you saw after he got the Ivy League degree with a 4.0, because he's a fan of Draft Guys TV, he's smart, that he wants to be a GM, and that he has a long-term arc plan of becoming a GM. And he said in high school is whenever he started enjoying watching prospects and trying to scout players. So I think we're going to be hearing about Andrew Hawkins for a long time either way, and I feel honored that he has anything to do. I still remember when he walked up to us and talked to us at the Texas versus the Nation game at the Sun Bowl, one of the best football stadiums in the world. And he said he was a big fan of our he's a CFL player that's a fan of our show. And I just thought, wow, like maybe there's something. Maybe Cease and I should just keep talking about football. This is working out.
Yeah, it was awesome. And here's the thing: he wants to be a GM. He's going to be. I mean, with his drive, with his motivation, what you think about, you bring about. And Andrew Hawkins understands the law of attraction. Matt, let's talk about the attraction of Hawkins on the Patriots roster, provided that he makes the team, because again, it's very packed with talent.
Yeah, I mean, certainly he's a guy that's very useful in a pinch, and he could be more useful in that if given the opportunity. But I think there's really not much there in terms of the established depth that's ahead of him. I don't see him getting a big opportunity at this stage, as talented as he is.
Let's go to the chat room, and we can react to me. Chat room. Wendell chimes in and says, how far has Kareem Hunt moved in rookie drafts in the last week or two since news says he looks good? Bloom, I've been texting with my KC guys, and I love Hunt. Disappointed by him at the Senior Bowl, as Matt will document for us. But, man, it sounds like the star of KC has been Hunt.
Yeah, and I think that, just using the kind of and I liked Hunt, but I do think we have to let Matt take the mic after this and give maybe it's the wet blanket brought to you by Matt Waldman. I liked Hunt. I thought outside of the top 4 running backs, Hunt was the one, and maybe Jamal Williams to a lesser extent, and in terms of just overall wattage, that I could see being truly a feature back for a team. And Hunt, I think, has a little gaps to fill in as a pass blocker. But I loved his suddenness, his receiving ability, and I thought that he was a player that translated really well. And one of the things I think we have to watch too, just as a quick aside, is I saw something out of Eagles OTAs, that they are putting Donnell Pumphrey and Darren Sproles on the field at the same time. And I do think that as the league continues to move towards the defenses being spread out and lighter, these smaller running backs are going to find more spots around the NFL. So I do think that Hunt, he can be a good fit for this offense, and maybe not like your classic 230-pound feature back, and they moved up to get him. And I think that's always something that we have to look for, at least if we're looking for. And as Matt pointed out, by the way, Josh Norris is doing a tremendous series right now on recapping the press conferences after the draft. But I think when a team trades up for a player, especially on the second day or especially on the first day, you know what they think. They're not always right, but you know what they think. And that's why I think Hunt just needs to pull even with Spencer Ware to get that opportunity. And as far as where he's going in rookie drafts now, you have the top 6, and I would say top 7 because I think John Ross should be number 7, but I'm seeing John Ross not always going 7th. I'm seeing him fall as far as 12th, 13th, 14th. After that top 6, you have any one of the like tight ends, top 3 tight ends. You have Hunt, you have Pirine, Kamara, all in play there. So the second half of the first round of rookie drafts is it's tied up again, is a bit of a jumble. And it only took 2.5 minutes that time. Or 3.5 minutes. The first time was 20 seconds. The Ottawa Senators are a mentally tough team, let me tell you. What was I talking about? So
Watch the torture live.
Yeah, exactly.
Bloom.
Nothing will ever cease, but nothing will ever match what when we took that Steelers overtime game all the way to the end, right? And that was when like everybody said, "Boy, we can't wait for another Thursday night game with the Steelers." Anyway, so this is right. Watch the torture live. Watch the torture live. It was actually off the post, off the back of the goalie, and just sitting there. So it's 2-2, everybody.
That Steelers game was amped up, though, because Matt was chiding us.
Yeah,
the entire time.
All the picture of Terry Bradshaw getting knocked out.
It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
That's one thing you and Elway have in common, Matt, is you both hate Terry Bradshaw. So there you go. Let's talk about Kareem Hunt, the talk of KC.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hunt's a nice player, and I just think that there are a lot of people who go, oh, he's the next Ray Rice, the next underrated superstar to emerge and become like this big-time feature back who's going to be a running back 1 in fantasy football on a consistent basis until he retires or whatever. I think that that's a little bit overstated for Kareem Hunt. I think Kareem Hunt is a Chester Taylor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar type of player, a player that if you get him in a starting lineup with good surrounding talent, he can give you 1,000 to 1,300 yards, depending on how good that surrounding talent is. He's a guy that can have a good 10-year career as either a full-time or part-time starter, but will always be looking over his shoulder when it comes to the team going, he's good for us. But man, we could get player X. Man, we could get a special player like this. Wow, this guy could be special. And Kareem Hunt's kind of that just reliable, dutiful, smart player who's got decent quickness, who certainly can set up a crease. He's got good balance. I don't think he's unbelievably powerful after he lost some of the weight that he lost. I don't think he obviously doesn't have breakaway speed. His pass catching is something that people compliment him on, but I think he has to really focus on, spend some time on a jugs machine and really focus on hand position depending on the location of the pass, and his pass blocking needs to improve. When you face him against Spencer Ware, I know that Spencer Ware wasn't unbelievable last year, but at the same time, when you look at him, he improved his pass protection as Andy Reid asked him to. Did a good job of being able to take that job over from Charkandrick West. He was the 4th best receiver after the catch out of all the running backs in the NFL. Andy Reid pretty much talked him up even before the draft and said, this guy's dirty tough, and he's someone that's going to have a role on this team. So when I see this, at best, I think Kareem Hunt Spencer Ware is Corral Buckhalter Deuce Staley. The old tandem that Andy Reid had in Philadelphia, not the Kareem, not the Kareem Hunt show. So I think he may pull even and people get excited about him, but it's going to be like a plus version of the excitement everyone's been having for the past 2 years about James White. It's just never going to happen to me in terms of him being like the feature back unless Ware gets hurt. And even at that point, you may see more Tyreek Hill in that role. So I like him. And if you can get him at a bargain, that's great. But I think he's going to be one of the more overhyped fantasy values of this summer if Spencer Ware stays healthy.
Audible Live each and every Thursday night right here on our YouTube channel. We appreciate everyone for watching, for listening. And Jason Duvall asks about Tyreek Hill. Does he take the next step in KC? Flash performance. Bloom, I know this.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill is not going to surprise anyone this year. And defensively, they will try to adjust for his speed. How does he respond?
Well, I think he will get every opportunity to respond, which is enough for me to take him where the fantasy community is already pricing in a massive regression for him. And I suppose, Cordell Patterson showed a lot of promise in his rookie year, and we saw how that went, although I know there was an offensive coordinator change. Percy Harvin actually started out his career with his best years and then went downhill from there. But look, Tyreek Hill, once he became more involved in the offense around week 7, was, I believe, the 7th ranked wide receiver in PPR leagues. And this isn't an offense that isn't necessarily a big, a wide open offense. Alex Smith isn't exactly who we think of moving the team up and down the field with his arm. And Tyreek Hill was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver in PPR leagues. Now, I think there were 3 or 4 rushing scores in there. Maybe those could come back off. Maybe he's easier accounted for as a runner. But Andy Reid has already said his role is going to increase. Now, we can say maybe Andy Reid isn't going to be able to do that. But I would think that, especially with the way, Tyreek Hill is one of those players now, kind of like the dog with the tennis ball. Like, you can move Tyreek Hill around, and the defense is going to adjust to that. Maybe Travis Kelce benefits more. Maybe Jeremy Maclin benefits more. Maybe the running game benefits more. But some of those plays are still going to spring for Tyreek Hill. And the fantasy community is taking somebody who was a wide receiver 1 once he was involved in the offense last year and drafting him like a wide receiver 3. He's going in the 5th or 6th round. In MFL 10s, where, hey, if he just scores 5 or 6 long touchdowns again this year, for that alone, he's easily worth a 5th or 6th round pick. It's a no-brainer taking him around his ADP in NFL 10s. Even in your typical redraft leagues where you may have to deal with the occasional zonk with him, if I can get him as my 3rd wide receiver, this is the kind of player as a 3rd wide receiver on your fantasy team that can be your knockout blow. He can be a 20 to 30 point player, and we can see how it goes for the first 5 or 6 weeks. But because he's being drafted around wide receiver 25, 30, that tells me that the fantasy community is overcompensating for the idea that the league's going to adjust for him. And I'm going to take a chance there.
As the 3rd wide receiver on your fantasy team, I definitely wouldn't mind Tyreek Hill for the reasons why Bloom outlined. But, Matt, I am less confident. I think that if you're a defense, you're going to say, don't let Tyreek Hill beat us. And that's better for Travis Kelce. It's better for Jeremy Maclin. And as a 3rd wide receiver, he can be that knockout punch because your stars essentially negate each other. Receiver takes out his top wide receiver. It usually winds up that way. So it is those 3rd guys. It is that flex play. The difference, including just getting the one hot guy that week. But Hill could be that difference maker. But Matt, where's the real story in your eyes on his fantasy potential this year?
I think the real story is the health of Jeremy Maclin, because Jeremy Maclin played 12 games last year and really wasn't healthy for probably half of the ones that, well, maybe not half, but for probably 3 or 4 of those games that he did finish out. So you're talking about being injured for half the season. And when you look at a player who is a consummate route runner like Maclin, who is working with a very, pocket-centric, technically, intellectually, like locked in Alex Smith, who isn't very creative with his game, that's a safety security blanket for you. And I think Tyreek Hill benefited from some creative play calling, and I think that he's a good player. I mean, I think that it's one of those things where he's more than Tavon Austin. I think he's more than Cordero Patterson. I think he can run some routes. I think that he can get open, but again, we're looking at him too working from the slot. So when you're matched up against a safety and you're able to do a little trickery and use DeAnthony Thomas on top of that, who may not be a real threat as a route runner or a pass catcher, but is enough of a threat with his speed with the ball in his hands that when you put both of those guys on the field, it can drive a defense to distraction. And you saw that Andy Reid did that more and more as the season went along. So, I don't underestimate Andy Reid being able to maintain some creativity with Tyreek Hill, but I do believe that when you look at the pecking order of this offense, Jeremy Maclin is still going to matter in this. So I definitely have put Tyreek Hill as a wide receiver 3 in my rankings, but like Bloom, I like that potential for him there because of the potential to have the big games, to have a big run of positive plays that can work week to week, and he's not overpriced to me. I mean, I think that if you were to say, yes, he's going to repeat as a top 15 player, then you're saying that Jeremy Maclin's health, good or bad, didn't really matter in his production last year. And I can't agree with that sentiment. I think that, Maclin's still too good of a player and still relied in this offense on a level that Hill needed to work on it, because even though Chris Conley improved with his reception and yardage totals last year, he didn't hit the end zone. He wasn't used much in the end zone. And Alex Smith doesn't like to throw those fade routes. He doesn't like to throw anything that says, I trust you, wide receiver, to go up and win the ball. You have to be wide open for me to throw you the football, which means that those little dump offs to a guy in space to let him create for him, which is what how Kelsey gets his touchdowns, and Conley doesn't even get a chance, then that's why Tyreek Hill also benefits, because it's more in that dump off game. But when you have a guy when you have Hill, Thomas, and Ware, who are all guys who can make plays after the catch, as well as we just discussed about Ware, using those guys in the flats in the middle of the field really benefits them well. And they know how to game plan for that in Kansas City. Reed's very good at that because he's been a master of the West Coast offense, where they've been doing that for 30, 35 years now.
Really quick, I want to jump in, Cease. Really quick, Matt, on that same note about guys that create after the catch. Are we sleeping from a long-term perspective on Demarcus Robinson in Kansas City? What did you think of Robinson? Because I know they've traded up to get Chesson from Michigan. They liked him, but Robinson was a player that, for a 4th-round pick, a lot of people thought, the talent was a lot higher than that, but there were also a lot of questions about him off the field.
Yeah, and that's what 4th-round picks are generally, are guys that people either really like and for one reason, but are really scared to pick them higher for others. It's always that kind of, the 4th round is kind of like that evaluation at a work thing, where basically they just lump everybody there, where you don't say he's bad, but you don't say he's great, and you can kind of hedge your bets either way. And that's really the deal with Robinson, because he was kind of a player with some bad attitude early on in his career at Florida, got in arguments with coaches, wasn't an unbelievably disciplined guy. You could see some of the disciplined issues as a player on the field in terms of just polish, but the athletic ability, the ability around the ball after the catch, the size, the quickness, those were all real positives with his game. But the thing is, there's lots of guys like that in the NFL. We see them as they're undrafted free agents too. So if they're not willing to work, then that probably says, well, you know what? We got Chesson. We'll put him in there because we know this kid's a worker and he's a good special teams guy on top of that. So he might outwork a guy like Robinson or push Robinson to be better. We'll find out.
It is the Audible Live. And Bloom, check out our man Josh Streeton here in the chat room. Looks like Jon Snow up there fighting the White Walkers.
You know nothing. You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Well, Josh Streeton knows something because he's got Samaje Perine as his sleeper this year. But how does it happen? Of course, Perine, the motorboat rookie of the year. He's already won the award. No one's got a better ass than him. So, Bloom, let's talk about Perine.
Yeah, well, and I think that from a redraft perspective, if you're looking at the outside of the top 4 rookie running backs, Perine is one that could really come through, because as great as Fat Rob was for Washington last year, I actually think that Perine should be able to outplay him and give Washington a lot of what Kelly gave them as far as efficiency. What Kelly gave them that Matt Jones wasn't. And just as a quick aside, Matt Jones wasn't terrible last year. He had fumble issues, but Jones on a yards per carry basis, was doing about what Kelly was doing. Just Kelly was doing it in a more efficient way. And maybe he didn't have the physical talent that Matt Jones had, but he was more of a no-nonsense north-south runner. And I think Perine's going to give them that, but he's got more natural power than Kelly. And as Matt was pointed out, I want to, I'm paraphrasing him when I say that if you look earlier in Perine's career and you're projecting that player, now you have somebody that we can get really excited. The name Michael Turner comes up not just because of the big old thighs, but because there's some burst there, there's some speed there. So I think that Perine is one of those guys. And as we get closer to draft season in July and August, when you get to a point in your draft, 7th, 8th, 9th round, where you filled out your core players, then you start looking for ceiling. And Perine's going to fit right in there. And I think that he should be going around that point in draft, 8th, 9th, 10th rounds. And then once the reports start to come in, and Perine was already very impressive in OTAs, and once the reports start to come in that Perine's going to push or even pass Kelly, and look at what we saw what this team did with Matt Jones last year. And I know it was because of fumbles, but Matt Jones was the starter and Kelly was just, on the bench. And then Kelly was a starter and Jones was on the bench. So I think we're not going to see a committee, and Chris Thompson's going to get his passing down work. But Perine can do what Kelly did. And what did Kelly have, like a 3-touchdown game last year? Perine can do that in this offense. And I would expect that if it's a straight up competition, Perine will win.
Dan Carpentieri, and I think I got that right, wants to hear Matt talk about Chad Williams, a player that, well, Matt, we've been discussing since our road trip to the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that caught my eye. I did a film room on boiler room, RSP boiler room videos on him probably back in like November, December. And one of the things that was very fascinating about him is his ability in the air to go after the ball. You kind of see a nicely sized, fairly strong, aggressive football player who made some plays that kind of reminded me a little bit of what Des Bryant could do, except the difference is that Chad's not quite as big, but he runs a 4.38 40. He's even faster than Des Bryant. So when we watched him at the Senior Bowl, you saw a lot of those traits come out where he was physical. He got off the jam. He was able to, withstand punishment and dish it out against cornerbacks. He kind of got under people's skin in a positive way. Like he was a guy that, defenders kind of got distracted by because of what he was able to do. And the errors that he made or the things that he needed to work on were small things, nuances of the game that when you get a chance to work with a master craftsman like Larry Fitzgerald for a year at least, that's going to help you iron some of those things out, like how to drag the toe when you catch the ball rather than try and dot the feet inbounds, trying to drag the feet instead, little things with how to set up a release, or finishing off a route and making sure that he's getting good depth. I liked a lot about Williams, and the fact that you're hearing out of OTAs that Bruce Arians is very positive about the wide receiver depth chart, but believes that Chad Williams specifically is a guy that's going to carry the torch once Larry Fitzgerald leaves. That's a big deal to make that type of a statement. You don't just I know that Arians tends to be somewhat of a positive guy in certain regards, but he's also very hard on his players and his coaches too. So the fact that he has that type of a high expectation, and that the Cardinals, if anything, we've seen in the past 3 to 4 years, despite the fact that John Brown had the injury he did, they've been very good at finding small school skill players. David Johnson, Kerwin Williams, John Brown. I think this kid Hakeem Valles from Monmouth might not be a bad tight end either to keep an eye on. And they love speed, and he's a guy that I would definitely have in your dynasty drafts as a guy your mid to late rounds. I would definitely grab him and hold on to him.
Bloom, how is Michael Thomas's play impacted by adding 10 pounds of muscle?
I mean, it can't hurt. I think that he already had a very aggressive game. Going back to Ohio State, he has an aggressive game as a route runner. He has an aggressive game after the catch. He has an aggressive game when the ball's in the air. And he was a player that, for a long-limbed player, that is solid but not bulky, very sudden and springy for his body type, for like that 6'10", 6'3", 210 kind of type. And we always have to remember, when these players are 21, 22, 23 coming out in the draft, their bodies are not mature yet. And this isn't one of those things where I think until a player is like 26 or 27, or we're talking about a running back where they say, we want you to put on 10 or 15 pounds like Lamar Miller did, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing that Martavis Bryant put more bulk on. I think that these guys with these long-limbed, sinewy bodies can get thicker and not lose their suddenness and be more physically formidable. So I won't be surprised if at the end of the season or mid-season we look at Michael Thomas on a similar fantasy level to Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham. He may even surpass a guy like Beckham. He may surpass. I think that if you're taking guys like Amari Cooper over him, I think that's really ill-advised because Michael Thomas, you're already magnifying his fantasy outlook, right? Like swap Michael Thomas and some other players that are going in the third or fourth round, and we would put them in the second round. Some of it is that Michael Thomas is going to be the number one receiver in a very pass-heavy, very efficient pass offense. But then when you add in his talent, I think you're going to see maybe the best numbers we've seen a Saints receiver put up in the Drew Brees era.
Yeah, getting ready for a big workload, getting ready with adding some more weight. Plus, we always have to remember these guys are going to lose 10 pounds during the year.
10 pounds is nothing for a
there
young
you have
guy.
it. Yeah. Matt, speaking of pounds, Fat Eddie Lacy. Let's talk about Thomas Rawls, our chat room, who is reacting, wants to know what Rawls is going to do this year.
I think that you're going to see this as a committee straight up, unless Eddie Lacy just proves what he's, unless he does what he's done for the past few years in Green Bay, which is, a few games of nice production and then getting hurt. And if that happens, then it's the Thomas Rawls, CJ Precise show. And I think that you're seeing the way that you need to regard this right now is that it's a three-headed committee, and that Rawls is probably the best all-around back. Eddie Lacy has the best boom-bust factor in terms of if he returns to his form and stays healthy, he's still a very good runner and a good guy who's going to be able to get work around the stripe. But CJ Precise, he progressed faster than people expected from him. If for those people like me who saw that he needed some work in terms of developing the intellectual side of the game and understanding, blocking schemes. And he worked at that, and he showed up pretty well. I mean, he had over 200 combined yards in 3 games and I believe 2 to 3 scores before he hurt his shoulder. And he did it against some pretty quality teams. So you're looking at a player who has a lot of upside, and he should be 1 year better if he continues to work at it. And with Seattle, we know that this is a team that they're all about the competition aspect. And I think what they did to bring Eddie Lacy in and incentivize him is we can never have too many running backs because look what happened to us last year. And so I think that's more the scenario for them. And if you're a fantasy owner at this stage, none of these guys you're going to vault highly over the other in your draft. You're basically looking at probably, I would probably look at it as Lacy, Rawls, and Precise in that order. But if you're picking Lacy anywhere outside the 6th, 7th round, I think that you're not getting a good value from him.
Bloom, are you sexting?
No comment.
I saw the grin. Bloom is like this.
I need some stress relief from this game about to go to overtime.
Well, I've done something today that has never been done before in the Mile High City. I actually found someone excited about Paxton Lynch on the staff, and his name is Mike McCoy. I asked Mike McCoy negatives. We talked about Paxton. He emphasized the things he needs to work on, but emphasized how sling it from the pocket. Kid's very comfortable. And I'll give you an example from the first day of OTAs, and I'd like you to both comment on this away. Mere observation. Paxton Lynch doesn't really hit the 5-yard outs very timely. Seems like he's aiming passes, not just flicking passes the way that you see with Trevor Siemian. But there were 3 near interceptions in the first day of OTA. 2 from Simeon, 1 from Lynch. The one from Lynch play, he split the double team because it was a route to Virgil Green. Made a play on the ball. He put the ball where it should have been. But Brandon Marshall made a great play, knocked it away. Defense goes nuts, right? Whoa! Next play, Paxton Lynch splits a double team for a 40-yard bomb to Demarius. Trevor Simeon, he had a near interception. Chris Harris almost made a play, dropped the interception. Right to him, dropped it. Oh, they go nuts. Next play, Simeon checks it down to Booker. So there's such a dichotomy in Denver because one guy can go long and only wants to go long, but doesn't really work the short stuff real good. All he wants to do is check down and go short, but he never wants to be aggressive. Come to the state of the Broncos quarterback situation. Matt, let's talk about it and talk about the fantasy impact it'll have on Demarius. By the way, he was healthy from the first time from last year when he hurt himself on the first play of the year. So bad he'd be in practice and he looked like an old man, and then he'd come out and he'd smack his hip like that. Well, I talked to Demarius today. He's healthier than he's ever been. He's obviously going to be the focal point of this offense. Fantasy receiver last year with just a tiny bit better quarterback play. Could he all of a sudden springboard back into that wide receiver 1 level? And I'm talking about 12 to 15-ish. So, Matt, let's discuss this, the observations from impact on Demarius and the manual. And, of course, Mike McCoy being excited about Paxton Lynch.
So let me ask you a quick question before I give my take on that. You mentioned Demaryius Thomas, and I remember last year you mentioned that this was a type of an injury that was going to impact him generally all career long for him, that it was always going to be an issue, just how much it would be managed. So has that changed?
He did not have surgery for reasons that he won't really get into. He doesn't really get into the nuts and bolts of the injury. But it's something that, as of right now, doesn't have to be managed because he's fully healthy, but could spring back up from what I know, the mechanics of the injury.
Right. That kind of scared me because when I heard you talk about that, I was thinking, well, this is an any given play type of scenario that's a little bit of a higher increase of possibility that I guess we can defer to Gene and ask him a little bit more about that down the line. But given that if he's healthy, you know, Paxton Lynch is a better fit for this offense with the type of receivers that they have because Emmanuel Sanders, and you could see it from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game last year when both of those guys were on the field. You know, Simeon was much more, you know, plays under 15 yards, and Paxton Lynch, the average play that he was throwing that was short was somewhere between 12 and 18 yards down the field, whereas with Simeon, it was like, you know, 6 to 8 yards down the field, and a big play was a 15-yarder, where a big play for Lynch was 25-30 yards down the field. And I think that that's what you'd see more often. Now, that's a great thing probably from the standpoint for, you know, leagues that are yardage only, not PPR, you know, that Lynch is probably going to give you a little bit more upside from that standpoint for your receivers who are going to be more yardage getters. But from the dink and dunk standpoint, maybe they won't be as great on the PPR level because Lynch may not always make the easy decisions that Trevor Simeon may make. But at the same time, you may see some of those bigger aggressive plays. And it's very telling that you brought up in that practice that after a bad play, or a potential negative play, one shrunk away from it and the other doubled down, which you like to see the double down, but then at the same time, you may see defenses go, he's going to double down, so we're just going to wait for it to happen and we're going to make him look stupid. So, you know, when you look at this all in all, I think that Paxton Lynch is obviously the guy that they want to be the future of the team in terms of if you're looking from solely those two quarterbacks. You'd like to see him be the future, and if he can be a guy that really solidifies the type of talent they thought he had to pick him in the first round and have the maniacal work ethic that, you know, Trevor Simeon has, and you obviously seem like that the team's excited about where he's heading, so he's obviously working at his craft. That's a good thing. And that works out very well. Long term, I mean, I'm still a believer in Chad Kelly in terms of his abilities. You know, the biggest question for me about Chad Kelly is, you know, after he gets the year to really rehab his body, and if he proves that he can stay mature, stay professional, not get in fights with people, not call out his own teammates and act like a doofus when it comes to like thinking that, you know, and that kind of thing. If he can show that he's matured on a certain level, I think he's the guy with the maniacal work ethic that Trevor Siemian is reputed to have, with the football skills, the physical arm talent skills of Paxton Lynch, and the integrated skills and understanding of the game that will make defenders in Denver shut up. You know, when it comes to them barking, because he will make them look stupid on a regular basis if he doesn't do anything stupid off the field.
And he wants to make them look stupid. That's the thing. There's that alpha. Bloom, by the way, for everyone out there, this is how involved they want Jake Butt to be. Jake Butt not participating in practice. He's in every first team huddle. Not participating, but he's involved in every first team huddle.
No.
Anyway, Bloom, let's talk about this pass.
Sure. Well, look, the strengths of this team on offense, with Demaryius Thomas healthy and Mike McCoy back, you're going to get the wide receiver screens back. Carlos Henderson is a player you want to get the ball in his hands quickly and let him do things after the catch. Emmanuel Sanders is a tremendous route runner. You want to make timing throws to him. You don't need a lot of daring do. You don't need a lot of creativity. You don't need a lot of arm talent or arm strength. You just need somebody who will execute the offense, and that's more Trevor Siemian. So if Paxton Lynch can start to mine more of what he has and be more precise on the kinds of plays that leverage off of the kind of talent. And also, let's remember, C.J. Anderson is a good receiver out of the backfield. Jamal Charles, if he can get it all back to where he was, 80% of where he was, he's a good receiver out of the backfield. This tells me that you want someone who's a disciplined executor of plays, and that's what Trevor Siemian showed us, that if there's a strength to his game, that's the strength. So I do think that if they're being rational this year, Paxton Lynch has to get better at those things. Even if Paxton Lynch can do things that Trevor Siemian can't, I don't know if those things are important when you have a team with the defense the Broncos has, and you're going to keep games low scoring and tighter to the vest. So I still would think that Lynch has to decisively beat Siemian, because Siemian fits better in what, if they can get the execution of Siemian with Lynch's natural talent, of course, that's the win-win scenario. But Lynch, I don't know if is going to be ready to do that. And I think this might be a case of Mike McCoy, really wanting that because of what capabilities can give this offense. But when they start to play in the preseason, it might tell a different story.
Bloom, what are y'all chatting about in Chuck?
I'm sorry, you hiccup there. What are we chatting about? What?
Christian McCaffrey. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, well, it's just Kelvin Benjamin. I think that someone on Twitter compared him to Queen Latifah in the pictures. Kelvin Benjamin is not the slimmest right now. And look, Kelvin Benjamin, there were reports, there was chatter that he only had that 1 year at Florida State, and there was chatter that when he wasn't playing, he was as heavy as about 300 pounds. So you look at him, and you look at the way he's running, and you look at his physique right now. Now he has a lot of time to get into shape, but we don't like to see this when it's something that has reportedly been a problem for the player in the past. So the question is, who steps up? Because Devin Funchess really leveled off, plateaued in his development. Curtis Samuel's not going to be there yet. I think Christian McCaffrey, it just makes sense. And I think it's in the chat room, they pointed out, what about Cam's ability on these short throws? But it just makes sense to me that, and again, like I said earlier about the idea of putting Pumphrey and Sproles out there together. And we talked about putting Tyreek Hill out there with Anthony Thomas that Matt brought up. There's no reason that in this NFL, Christian McCaffrey can't catch 80 or 90 balls this year. There's no reason. Because we saw this with different offenses over the years where high percentage pass plays can be the same function as running plays in your offense. They can put you in the down and distances you need and to get to the parts of the playbook that you want. And it just seems to me that that's one of the reasons you take Christian McCaffrey number 8. You get him isolated in one-on-one situations where he's going to win consistently. And yeah, Cam Newton has got to make those throws, but still they're high percentage throws. So I think that for PPR leagues, if you're going to take the plunge with a running back from this rookie class at ADP or even reach for them a little bit, it's McCaffrey.
Audible Live, Thursday nights. YouTube.com/footballguys, Matt, let's tie a bow on this program.
Well, I just would like to say that I have my hanky handy now for Samaje Perine for any type of slobber that tends to happen between you and I, because I call him the cast iron skillet. You know, defenders hit him, they're like butter hitting a hot cast iron skillet. And I am totally about Samaje Perine. I'll throw in Jamal Anderson as another comparison for Samaje Perine. And I'll bring up another player who's maybe growing and getting some mini camp love that might be worthwhile to talk about. And that's one Devontae Parker. I have never been extremely high on Devontae Parker. And the reason has always been that he is a guy that always said, I just lean on my God-given talent. And to me, that's a big neon sign that says doesn't understand what he's getting into in the NFL. And he didn't know how to handle his sleep schedule, recovery schedule, his diet, didn't understand any of that stuff, had to be put in the slot early on in his career, wasn't really working at the mental part, the technical, strategic part of the game, wasn't preparing like a professional. And you could see him get a little better last year if he got dug into by his coach, Adam Gase, it was Gase, right? His coach basically saying, look, you don't even take care of yourself. What the heck is going on around here? And towards the end of the season, you started to see flashes of the Devontae Parker we saw at Louisville. This year, according to the Dolphins reports, we're seeing a guy who has minded his sleep schedule, figured out his diet. He's staying after practice. He's asking tons of questions and studying the game and trying to figure out more about how the game actually works. And if that happens and works out, I don't care if it's Ryan Tannehill or Matt Moore, whoever the else ends up in that, in that position. If bad things happen in Miami, I think we're going to see a much better Devontae Parker, and he might actually be worth the picks in terms of the ADP he was in the past couple of years. And this might be the time to get him at a value.
Bloom, final thoughts.
The Penguins better freaking win this game. No, final thoughts. I think what we're talking about in these OTAs, and Chris Burke, by the way, a Sports Illustrated writer doing great stuff, just summarizing what we're hearing out of different OTAs every day. You should not feel free to ignore OTAs and you should not feel free to ignore training camp, because as Matt just painted a wonderful picture there, OTAs is when we start to see the beginnings, the opening chapter, the prologue, that we look back on the players that swing fantasy leagues. And it's not just the individual players looking better and better shape or the way they're being used. It can be just a team and a unit being more crisp, or getting different players back and things are starting to click. So this is a time to pay attention, because it will give you, some of these little headlines, they'll have that little golden thread in them that you'll come back to, and maybe when you're on the clock in your draft, it'll help you make a 50-50 call. And this is a time to be paying attention to these things. And it's still, and there's so many great people covering the league right now and analyzing it, that it's still very entertaining, even though that football is still 3 months away.
Follow Matt Waldman on Twitter at Matt Waldman. Follow Sigmund Bloom at Sigmund Bloom. I'm Matthew Salami, and the show is at the Audible. We keep it simple for you and talk about the complexities, which are the National Football League, from Denver, Georgia, and Texas. We're all saying good night, stay tuned, and stay frosty.